Um, have you ever worked for someone who, made you feel like an absolute genius and then at a completely different job worked for someone who made you second guess your own competence entirely?
Oh, yeah. It's a completely jarring experience.
Right. It's universally shared. Like, you haven't changed, your resume hasn't changed, but your ability to actually use your brain seems to either vanish or double, depending entirely on who is sitting in the corner office.
Exactly. It's a fascinating phenomenon.
So today we're looking at why some leaders seem to just, well, drain the brain power right out of a room, while others somehow manage to double their team's intelligence. We're going to explore the hidden mechanics of how you can actively extract the untapped brilliance from the people around you.
It's such a crucial topic for anyone who works with, well, people.
It really is. And, if you're someone who loves finding these kinds of shortcuts to being well-informed, subscribing to the BookSnap channel is like the smartest move you can make today. It's honestly the best way to get these insights delivered regularly so you never miss out on that edge.
Yeah, definitely unsubscribe.
So, jumping into the mission of this deep dive, we are looking at the insights from a book called Multipliers by Liz Wiseman and Greg McKeown. And their core premise completely dismantles a major assumption we make about business. They argue that organizations rarely suffer from a lack of talent. They suffer from the misuse of it.
Right. The talent is already there.
Exactly. Like, the problem isn't a lack of smart people, it's the presence of leaders who make smart people less smart.
And that contrast, it's one of the most studied things in organizational psychology because we often look at an underperforming team and we just assume there's a talent deficit.
We think we need to hire better people.
Right. We think, oh, the solution is to fire the bottom 10% or, recruit from better universities or spend millions on new training programs. We just assume we need smarter people in the room.
But this book forces a total reevaluation of what a leadership crisis actually looks like.
It does. Because the failure isn't in the hiring pipeline, it's in the extraction mechanism. The intelligence is just sitting dormant. And the book divides the leadership landscape into two opposing archetypes to explain this: the diminisher and the multiplier.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's look at the diminisher first, because
Right.
honestly, the description is almost uncomfortably familiar for a lot of people.
It really hits close to home.
It does. And this isn't necessarily like a maliciously evil boss.
Oh,
Often the diminisher is a highly capable, driven individual who firmly believes they are the smartest person in the room, and because they believe that, they naturally dominate all the thinking.
right. They monopolize the decisions.
Yeah, they answer instead of asking. They micromanage details.
Right.
And to upper management, they look like a superstar, right?
Yeah.
Because they always have the answer and they constantly swoop in to save the day.
But internally, beneath that superstar image,
Yeah,
a very destructive mechanical process is happening.
what's going on exactly?
Well, the diminisher operates as a cognitive bottleneck. If you look at it through, like, a systems engineering lens, it's like an organization running on an old computer architecture where every single complex calculation has to pass through one single overheating processor.
And that overheating processor is the leader.
Exactly. They rewrite the reports, they answer the questions instead of asking them, and the team simply adapts to that bottleneck.
Which leads to this state of learned helplessness.
Precisely. If every piece of data has to go through that one processor, the other processors in the network they just go to sleep. The team stops taking initiative.
Because why bother? The boss is just going to overwrite your work anyway, so why burn the mental calories?
Right. And the tragic irony of the diminisher is that they're usually working themselves into clinical burnout. I mean, they're putting in 80-hour weeks, carrying the entire department, but overall performance actually drops.
Wow. So they're expanding massive energy just to actively suppress their own team's intelligence.
That's wild, but yes.
So that perfectly sets up the contrast with the multiplier. And, my analogy for this is if a diminisher is like this giant tree that blocks all the sunlight so nothing grows underneath, a multiplier is the nutrient-rich soil that helps the whole forest thrive.
I love that. That's a great visual. And the multiplier approaches the room with a totally different objective. They don't want to be the smartest person in the room. They want everyone in the room to operate at peak intelligence.
They shift from being a genius to a genius maker.
Yes. They act as a parallel processing network. Instead of hoarding the cognitive load, they distribute it. They actively seek out dissenting opinions. They give genuine ownership to the team.
And what's fascinating is that the fundamental difference isn't about their own IQ, right?
Not at all. It has nothing to do with the leader's raw technical skill. It's a behavioral difference in how they manage the cognitive capacity of others.
And the results are staggering. The sources point out that a multiplier can extract almost double the productivity compared to a diminisher.
Double the output.
Yeah, with the exact same people, exact same budget. So the obvious question is, how does this actually function on a Tuesday morning? Like, what are the specific mechanisms?
Well, the framework identifies a few core practices. The first one is being a talent magnet. But this goes way beyond just having a good hiring strategy. It's about deployment.
Deployment, what does that look like?
They look past a person's current job title or their past experience, and they look at their raw potential. They find what someone is naturally brilliant at, and they drop them into a role that requires exactly that brilliance, giving them a massive runway to operate.
Whereas a diminisher, they tend to hoard talent. Like, they'll hire brilliant people because it looks good, but then they stifle them to maintain control.
Right. It actually scares off real talent.
Okay, so that's a talent magnet. What's the second practice?
The second one is crucial. They operate as energy liberators. This is about the mechanics of psychological safety.
Which I know sounds like a soft corporate buzzword, but there's actual biology behind it.
Oh, absolutely.
Because when a diminisher leads by tension, demanding creativity but publicly punishing the slightest mistake, they trigger a fear response. And biologically, your amygdala hijacks your nervous system. You physically cannot perform high-level problem-solving in fight-or-flight mode.
That biological reality is exactly why fear kills initiative. The team learns that the safest survival strategy is just invisibility. Keep your head down.
Don't volunteer a new idea, because an idea carries the risk of failure.
Exactly. But a multiplier understands this. They demand incredibly high standards, but they completely decouple those standards from the fear of punishment for honest mistakes.
They separate the person's worth from the experimental failure, which is the perfect setup for the third practice, the challenger.
Because once you have that safe environment, you actually have to use it.
Exactly. And instead of handing down perfectly safe, step-by-step instructions, a multiplier sets massive, seemingly impossible goals. They point to the horizon and ask the team, how do we get there?
They shift the burden of strategic thinking entirely onto the employees. And by doing that, they generate high mental energy. People don't want easy jobs. Easy jobs lead to profound disengagement.
Okay, so what does this all mean in reality? Because doesn't giving people a massive challenge without a step-by-step plan just terrify them? Like, if Q3 revenue depends on it, I'm not feeling energized. I'm panicking.
That is a critical distinction to make. You are describing abandonment, not a challenge.
Oh, interesting.
A multiplier doesn't just throw you in the deep end of the ocean and walk away. They bound the risk. They define the massive goal, but they establish clear parameters, check-in points, and a safety net.
All within that energy liberator environment.
Exactly. So if you hit a wall in week 2, you know you can bring it to the leader without being fired. The leader will help you analyze the failure and pivot. That bounded autonomy transforms panic into deep ownership.
So it's about providing the scaffolding, not the blueprint.
Yes. The structure catches them, but they design the building.
I love that. So let's bring this down to the individual level. Say you're listening to this and you recognize some diminisher traits in yourself. It happens to anyone who's highly competent. You see a problem, you know the answer, and your instinct is to just fix it. How do you rewire your habits to start bottling up the team?
The shift requires a fundamental reframing of your role. You have to realize that stepping back does not mean you're becoming passive. You're changing the method of your influence from providing answers to extracting insights.
And the sources highlight some highly practical shifts for this, right? The first one is fascinating because it's so simple, yet agonizingly difficult to actually execute. It's the 5-second pause.
Oh yes, the 5-second pause.
When a problem is raised in a meeting, you force yourself to wait 5 full seconds before speaking. You just sit there in silence. Here's where it's really interesting because it's essentially a weaponized awkward silence.
It feels like an eternity for a fast-paced leader. It feels catastrophic.
It really does. You know the solution. Your ego is screaming at you to just say it to save time, and biting your tongue is a profound test of ego management.
But that specific window of silence is where the magic happens. That pause is the exact space where the cognitive load shifts from you to the rest of the room.
Because if you jump in at second 2, you short-circuit their brains.
Exactly. You train them that they never need to process complex problems because the boss will always solve it. By forcing the silence, you create a vacuum that someone else's intelligence is forced to fill.
And sitting in silence isn't enough. You have to ask questions instead of explaining, like turning the spotlight back on them and asking, how would you approach this?
Right. You are demanding that they engage their own problem-solving machinery.
Hmm.
A diminisher uses their intelligence as a weapon to shut down the conversation. A multiplier uses their intelligence to craft the exact right question.
Which directly addresses a massive pitfall that I think almost every manager falls into, the savior trap.
Oh, the savior trap is so common.
It's when you solve a problem you were never explicitly asked to solve. Someone comes to vent about a roadblock, and before they even finish, you're firing off solutions and clearing the path for them.
We fall into that trap because our intent is good, We want to be helpful. But the mechanical reality is that when you solve their problem for them, you are stealing their reps.
Sealing their reps, like doing someone else's push-ups at the gym and then expecting them to build muscle.
Precisely. You have robbed them of the opportunity to develop their own resilience.
Hmm.
And you subtly signal that you don't trust them to figure it out. A multiplier resists that trap. They listen, validate the frustration, and ask, so what is your next move?
That they leave the ownership with the person, which ties perfectly into how you delegate. The shift is moving from dictating the method to defining the goal. You tell them what the finish line looks like, but remove yourself from the micro details.
And this requires an enormous amount of restraint. Because their method is going to look different from yours. It might look inefficient at first.
But if the result is achieved, the method shouldn't matter.
Exactly. And by letting them chart their own course, they might discover a more innovative process than the one you would have mandated.
But letting them chart their course guarantees they're going to stumble, which means you have to build an infrastructure for smart failure, explicitly communicating that making mistakes is a required part of learning.
The distinction between smart failure and mere incompetence is vital. A smart failure is when a team tries a well-reasoned approach, tests a hypothesis, and the outcome isn't what they expected.
It generates valuable data.
Yes. A multiplier extracts that data and analyzes it without assigning blame. That's entirely different from just accepting sloppy work.
You're harvesting the lesson rather than punishing the stumble.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so we've looked at these individual daily interactions. Now let's zoom out. What happens to the entire organization when these multiplier strategies are applied at scale?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the organizational physics completely change. Companies led by multipliers operate with incredible agility.
Because decisions aren't bottlenecked at the top.
Exactly. The organization learns and adapts rapidly. Employees exhibit high levels of innovation because of that psychological safety. And employee retention skyrockets because people want to feel brilliant and challenged.
The contrast with a diminisher-led organization is just stark. In those environments, decision-making is painfully slow. Every trivial choice has to funnel up to the sole processor at the top.
The managers are exhausted and the employees are paralyzed by a culture of compliance.
And this massive disparity has nothing to do with funding or market conditions. It's entirely dictated by the leadership framework.
It highlights a profound truth. A leader's primary job is no longer task administration. It's the management of collective cognitive energy. Intelligence is an individual trait. It's a collective fluid resource.
And nowhere is that management more visible than during a crisis.
Oh, crisis leadership is where the mask completely falls off.
Right. Say a massive supply chain failure hits. The pressure is immense. A diminisher's instinct is to centralize control. They lock the boarding doors and basically tell the company, stand back, I will navigate us out of this.
They do that because under extreme stress, their core belief that they are the only capable person in the room overrides everything. They try to outthink the crisis alone.
But a modern crisis can't be solved by a single processor.
No, it can't. And a multiplier does the exact opposite. They decentralize, they open the doors, pull in diverse perspectives, and distribute the cognitive load. They say, this problem is too complex for one person. I need every single one of your minds focused on this.
They need the parallel processing power of the entire network.
Yes, and this raises an important question. The data shows teams under a diminisher are utilizing a tiny fraction of their mental capacity, often less than half. We tend to blame the employees and call them lazy.
But the leader is actively suppressing the other 50%.
Exactly. Under a multiplier, that exact same team utilizes almost all their capacity. The intelligence was always there, it just lacked the environment to express itself.
It's a profound paradigm shift. So, to summarize our key takeaways today, the ultimate test of true leadership is not your ability to be the smartest person in the room. Your personal IQ is irrelevant if it creates a bottleneck.
Right. True leadership is your ability to get everyone else in the room to think at their maximum capacity.
Great institutions aren't built on the back of a solo genius. They are built by leaders who design environments where intelligence inherently multiplies.
It totally changes how you measure success. Diminishers measure success by how many problems they personally solved. Multipliers measure success by how many problems their team solved without them.
Every single day, you face a structural choice. You can either be the center of all the answers, demanding that all data flow through you, or you can be the generator of thinking, stepping back, embracing the awkward silence, and forcing the intelligence around you to wake up. Diminishers create capable followers, but multipliers create new leaders.
And that transition is entirely within your control. You just have to have the ego discipline to get out of your team's way.
So, as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over. If leadership is fundamentally about the extraction of collective intelligence, what hidden reservoirs of brilliance are currently sitting completely dormant in the people around you right now?
That's the real question.
It is. Whether it's your team, your family, your peers, what untapped genius is just waiting for you to ask the right question and then stay silent long enough to let them answer. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive today. We really appreciate you exploring the mechanics of human potential with us.
It's been a great conversation.
And remember, if you want to keep fueling that inner learner, make sure you subscribe to the BookSnap channel so you never miss out on these insights. Think back to that boss who made you feel like an absolute genius. You now know exactly how they did it. Go out there and build that environment for someone else.